Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to the Mayor's Breakfast for January 2021. I'm Michael Perrin from the Ottawa Business Journal. This breakfast series dates all the way back to the 1990s. It provides attendees with an opportunity to meet with Mayor Jim Watson on a regular basis and receive important updates on civic issues. The Mayor's Breakfast also features great guest speakers ranging from big-name CEOs to federal and provincial political leaders and other important public officials. The breakfast series is co-produced 9 to 10 times per year by the Ottawa Business Journal and the Ottawa Board of Trade in partnership with Mayor Jim Watson. Normally, this Mayor's Breakfast takes place at City Hall with lots of energetic networking and an expansive hot buffet. These days, thanks to COVID-19, OBJ and the Board of Trade are working with Rogers TV to keep this series active. A big thanks to Rogers for all its hard work. By the way, we still have networking. It happens virtually on Zoom before the broadcast. We have an excellent show lined up for you today. First, you'll hear from the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade, Su-Ling Ching, who will share her thoughts on how her organization is responding to the urgent need of local business. Second, Mayor Jim Watson will provide an important City Hall update. And we have an extremely topical guest speaker for you today. Barely 1 week after the inauguration of US President Joe Biden, we turn our attention to the trading relationship that underpins Canada's economy. To explore this relationship, we have two terrific guests. First, we have US Barack Obama's former ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman, one of the foremost experts on the world's largest trading relationship. The former ambassador will be in conversation with Perrin, Beatty, the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and former cabinet minister to Prime Ministers Joe Clark and Brian Mulroney. The conversation promises to be interesting and insightful. I can't wait. As we kick off the show, let's recognize some of the great organizations that support this speaker series. Our lead sponsor is Hydro Ottawa. Next, the Commissionaires Ottawa, the Westin Ottawa, Algonquin College, La Cité, Rogers Communications, RBC, Enbridge, Oakwood Designers and Builders, Royal LePage Commercial, Capital Office Interiors and Steelcase, the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club, and finally, the Centurion Conference and Event Center. A big thank you to all those sponsors for sticking with us. Now let's welcome my partner in producing this event, the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade, Su-Ling Ching. Welcome, Su-Ling.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to see you. Unfortunately, it's virtual. But, we're staying connected through the Mayor's Breakfast and all this fantastic technology. Thanks to Rogers again for bringing us together. So, Su-Ling, I'm so happy we're going to spend a few minutes here talking about the Board of Trade, something we don't always do, to be honest, at our in-person events. So that's another advantage of this new virtual world. Bring us up to speed on what's been happening with the Board of Trade. You had gone through an amalgamation about 2 years ago. You were into the amalgamation and then the pandemic hit. So just give us a sense for our viewers today, a broader sense of what's happening with the Board of Trade.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Well, as many people in the business community would know, that up till the summer of 2018, there were still a handful of chambers of commerce and boards of trade in Ottawa, and we worked diligently to consolidate those for the purposes of strengthening our voice of business and offering better support to our businesses. And so we got that done, and we're working through the transition and ready to launch a new plan for 2020. And like many of you out there, we had to adjust those plans to accommodate this pandemic that we've been going through. So we're very lucky that we were able to get all of that work done and work together so that we were better positioned to work through supporting our businesses during this time.
It's such a good point you're making, Suling, because again, there were this series of chambers before this, and you got the
Mhm.
amalgamation done right in time for one of the most important periods, maybe for chambers of commerce that I've ever experienced in my 20 plus years at
Mhm.
Ottawa Business Journal. You've been extremely active, the Board of Trade. Tell us about what you've been
Mhm.
doing during the pandemic to keep you guys busy.
Well, certainly. So we've been working very closely with our local stakeholders, including the City of Ottawa, to support the businesses here, to advocate together for support at the provincial and the federal level. We've also been working really closely with our partners at the Ontario and the Canadian Chambers of Commerce. And this year we also joined coalition called the Global Canadian Cities Coalition to look at issues that are specific to urban areas. So we've been working with all of these colleagues, as well as our business and community leaders here in Ottawa, to help design the programs, make recommendations on the programs that have come out from every level of government, and to start to plan for our economic recovery as well.
Again, I think the key point you're making there is that as local business was suffering to keep their doors open, many of them suffering to keep their doors open during the pandemic, they needed someone to speak to the public officials to let them know what was happening on main streets, to let them know what programs were needed, what regulations, and that. Has been you. That has been the Board of Trade
Mm-hmm.
in those discussions, I'm sure, on a day-to-day basis, making
Mm-hmm.
sure the voice of local business was heard and is being considered in this urgent time.
And that's true. But I want to acknowledge as well, like many of our members have been meeting with us daily, weekly, every 2 weeks to make sure that we're on top of what it is that they needed to survive. And even programs that were released, as you know, that didn't come out perfectly in the beginning, the government very quickly reached out to make sure that they had the proper feedback and were able to make tweaks to programs to make them relevant and as quickly as possible. So it's been an exciting time in that there's been such a high level of communication and collaboration, not like anything I've ever seen in my own experience.
So tell us in a very real world way what that advocacy
Mm-hmm.
looks like on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis from the Board of Trade.
Well, it's a lot of meetings, a lot of virtual meetings, a lot of calls, letters, and presentations. Research and fact finding, and being able to disseminate information, share that information clearly, and look for new and innovative ways. Just as our many businesses have been forced to be resilient, to look for new and creative ways to get through. So have we as an organization in making our recommendations to support business.
So as we're wrapping up in the last few minutes here, Suling, I was hoping you could help us look forward to 2021 and what priorities the Board of Trade has for this new year.
Thank you, Michael. So we are embarking on a new strategic plan for the next 3 years. And as you know, our mission is to create prosperity in our community. And we do that primarily through advocacy, through collaboration and leadership. And so we will continue to look for ways to support our businesses to scale themselves through benefits and programs and funding opportunities right now to get through recovery. We'll also continue to work with our stakeholders to design an economic recovery for our region and whatever policies that we need to continue to recommend to government in order to support that. And lastly, that we will look for ways to continue to promote Ottawa as the best place to live and work and invest and build a business. And so that's our plan moving forward. We know there are some key emerging issues, including talent attraction and retention, infrastructure strategy and high impact projects in Ottawa, and really how we are going to support our small businesses as they look to recover after lockdown is over.
Any observation to share? You know, we could have never imagined in February 2020, for example, what 2020 would bring. any observations on the linkages in our community, how the local economy works, the importance of public health? What would you share with the viewers this morning?
Well, almost exactly what you said. You know, we could always have said that we were all connected, but this was a real life lesson for us and how connected we are, small business to large business, every aspect of the community. But one thing that has become extremely evident is that the public health and safety of our community, its mental well-being, and its economic prosperity are all completely intertwined. And that's something that will, you know, be within the fabric of how we move forward in terms of supporting our businesses and looking for economic growth in our community.
Well, thanks so much to you, Su-Ling, your staff, and all the directors at the Ottawa Board of Trade for everything you're doing to help ensure brighter days ahead for local business. Your work has never been more important than in your 160-year-plus history. Thanks so much. Now it's time to welcome our host, His Worship, Mayor Jim Watson, to provide an important update from City Hall. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je vous souhaite à tous la bienvenue à ce petit déjeuner du maire virtuel ce matin. It's my pleasure to provide this introduction to what will be a very timely and interesting conversation with our guest speakers. I want to begin by thanking our partners at the Ottawa Business Journal and the Ottawa Board of Trade. I also want to thank the event sponsors and everyone who helped organize the first Mayor's Breakfast of the new year, 2021. President Biden and Vice President Harris were sworn into office on January 20th after a tumultuous time in American history and some rough patches in Canada-US relations. I'm pleased to welcome our guest speakers today who possess incredible experience and insight into diplomatic, business, and trade relations between our two countries. Ambassador Bruce Heyman, former United States Ambassador to Canada, and the Honorable Perrin Beatty, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. To say it's been a difficult start to the year would be an understatement, but we have persevered in the face of many challenges, and there are some encouraging signs. We continue to do everything possible to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic and keep our residents safe and healthy. Nous sommes dans le même bateau, certainement. We are here in this together, and I want to take a moment to highlight some of the innovative ways that we are working together and managing our way through this crisis. Entrepreneurs across the city reinvented their businesses from one day to the next, many redirecting their manufacturing capacity to fight COVID-19. Local companies shifted production and began producing PPE, hand sanitizer, and other equipment for frontline workers, businesses, and of course the public. Je suis très impressionné par l'initiative de toutes les entreprises locales ici à Ottawa. Restaurants and local businesses created new and innovative ways to market themselves and provide their services to the public. We also saw on full display the generosity of so many residents in our community as they came forward to help complete strangers make it through these very difficult times. People mobilized to support their communities and help neighbors by raising money and providing masks and delivering meals and supplies. This happened across the city. Residents mobilizing behind groups like Nepean Neighbors, who paired up volunteers with residents needing help getting groceries and medication, dog walking, and picking up pet supplies while they were in isolation. Looking back on so many acts of generosity and kindness, I hope we will also remember them when we think of the year that was 2020. Beyond the generosity of our residents and businesses, our city team stepped up in a significant way to help our community during this pandemic. Working with our partners, we have now conducted over 7,000 wellness visits to residents who are isolated or more at risk, providing food baskets, masks, and mental health referrals along the way. We've opened 3 respite centers to have access for those individuals who are homeless, so showers and other supports for residents in our shelter system. We also continue to make progress on construction and development projects across the city, including Stage 2 LRT and our future Central Public Library. Last September, for instance, the Combined Storage Sewer Tunnel, CSST, the jewel in the crown of the Ottawa River Action Plan, was finally put into effect to protect the health of this great river. All this construction activity helped us sustain our local economy and thousands of good-paying jobs throughout this pandemic, and our staff in planning, infrastructure, and economic development played a pivotal role in making sure we didn't skip a beat on that front. With the vaccination campaign underway, Now is the time to plan how our economy can rebound solidly once most of us have been vaccinated and life returns to the new normal. We need to start looking at policy changes, investments, or community building projects that will help us get there. That's why on February 9th, I'll host an economic rebound roundtable with leaders in key sectors of our economy so we can identify those key opportunities for our economy and chart a course of action for our city's economic rebound. Our economic development partners are certainly doing a lot to maintain Ottawa's reputation as a world-class city for technology and innovation. And our friends at Ottawa Tourism are also in full swing to keep the momentum and reputation as an impressive host city, and they are making sure we have a solid pipeline of major events for when things get back to normal. I look to later this year with a sense of cautious optimism because I dare to think that 2021 will end on a much better and more positive note than it began. Our vaccine rollout campaign is a monumental community effort, and I want to thank all of the partners that are involved. I encourage all residents to remain hopeful and kind and to take good care of each other and yourselves while we make it through this home stretch of the COVID-19 pandemic. I now have the great pleasure of introducing today's guest speakers, two friends. Ambassador Bruce Heyman served as the US Ambassador to Canada under President Barack Obama from 2014 to 2017. And Bruce, we miss you and Vicky very much in your great presence in supporting so many good causes. And you champion more collaboration and cross-border investments and continues to emphasize the importance of the Canada-US relationship. Prior to becoming a US Ambassador, he spent 33 years at Goldman Sachs, where he served as partner and managing director in the Chicago office. He's a member of the advisory board to the Canadian Institute at the Wilson Center, an honorary patron to the Council of the Great Lakes region, and he also sits on the advisory board for Uptake in Chicago. Mr. Heyman is a magna cum laude graduate with a BA and an MBA from Vanderbilt University, and he was named one of the top 50 most powerful business people by Canadian Business Magazine in both 2014 and 2016. He continues to share his insights into international relations and the art of diplomacy in public speaking events across Canada and the United States, and we're thrilled to have him join us here today. And he wrote a wonderful book as well, and I encourage you to read that. I'm equally pleased to welcome the Honourable Perrin Beatty, who is President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Beatty is an officer of the Order of Canada and is recognized for his lifetime of public service and his contributions as a politician and corporate leader to the development of our nation. He was a member of Parliament for almost 21 years and held several cabinet positions, including Solicitor General, Defence Minister, Health Minister, and Minister of External Affairs. After the 1993 federal election, he joined several private sector boards and worked as a communications consultant. He was appointed President and CEO of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in 1995, a position he held until 1999. And he served as Chancellor of the University of Ontario Institute of Technology from 2008 to 2015. The Honourable Perrin Beatty has received honorary Doctor of Law degrees from Western University, the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, and Wilfrid Laurier University. Please join me in welcoming our guest speakers, the Honourable Perrin Beatty and Ambassador Bruce Heyman. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thanks very much, Jim, for that introduction. Bruce, let me, first of all, welcome you back to Ottawa, even virtually. It's a treat to see you back here. And it's hard to believe that it was 4 years ago, last week, that you got in the car and drove down to Chicago. It seems like only yesterday that you were here, and you've been very active in terms of being a familiar face in Canada during that time and being engaged in bilateral issues. So let me start with the obvious question. The last time that you were here, it was as the representative of President Obama and Vice President Biden. How about the idea of a gig as representative of President Biden and Vice President Harris?
So first of all, it's so good to see you. And I always love when you ask these kinds of questions to get started. So first of all, I've been back to Ottawa as private citizen, Bruce and Vicky, and we've been greeted with open arms and great friendship by so many of our good friends and just acquaintances throughout the community. We loved our time in Ottawa and serving the country, and I think it was a highlight of our two lives, our lives together, and then the work that we did individually. And it was a real highlight for us. And we were on this unexpected path in the post-ambassadorial period. Because, most ambassadors, let's just go do some boards or go back into business or serve on a financial institution or do something along those lines. And we found ourselves in a position, strangely, that just months after leaving, we had a president who was attacking Canada, attacking the prime minister, attacking the foreign minister with language and style and tone that, it got to the point where, nobody was actually defending the relationship. And, so we filled in as citizen ambassadors. I told people that I received this title. In the US, we get this title for life, although you say retired or former. But I think it comes with responsibility. And I swore in to preserve and protect the United States Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And I was sworn in by Joe Biden, right there. And I'll tell you, you don't swear out. When I left 4 years ago, it wasn't like, okay, you're done. You don't have to have that allegiance. So we took this on with great passion and abandon. As you know, we wrote a book and we did a book tour. Then we got very involved in election outcomes, and we feel that we really committed ourselves. And now it's been the better part of a decade that we focused on the Canada-U.S. relationship. We love it, and we love our friends, and we can't wait to come back to visit our friends all across the country. And it would be highly unusual to come back in a professional way, but in a friendly way, which is the way, we've been over the last few years. I can see that ongoing for the rest of our lives.
I wouldn't call that a Sherman-like statement.
You never say never to anything in life, especially after a year of a pandemic. I mean, all of the impossibilities of life, much of which took place over this last year. And so nothing's impossible. It's just improbable.
Let's talk for a minute about the job. I've often said that Canada has two ambassadors, one stationed in Washington, the other stationed in Ottawa. But the U.S. ambassador, the only American whose job it is to think about Canada 24 hours a day. And it is an extraordinary responsibility. And I'm struck by the commitment that you and so many of your predecessors have had. To a great extent, since you left 4 years ago, we've been without active ambassadorial representation in Ottawa. As President Biden looks at the criteria for appointing an ambassador, you and most of your predecessors had a political background as opposed to coming out of the diplomatic service. Would you recommend that he reach out for somebody with that political background, or that you look at a professional diplomat? What are the criteria that he should be looking at in the appointment of an ambassador?
This is a really good question, and one in which a lot of people struggle sometimes to understand. There are about between 60 and 70% of the ambassadors of the United States serving around the world are career diplomats. And so that means the corollary is that 30 to 40% are political appointees. Now, when it comes to our closest allies, best friends, folks who have really large embassy presence in Washington, they think that they've got the connectivity to the career class. They have the connectivity to the State Department. They have the connectivity, through deputy chief submission, back and forth, through, foreign officers who take leads in various files for department heads. They feel they have that. What Canada wants and other key allies want is somebody who is comfortable enough to do these things. And so to do that, you need somebody who's close enough with the people who are close to the president to do that. And you also have to be comfortable enough that you're not worried about your career, whereas a career civil servant doing that and making phone calls into the White House, if you've spent 20 years in the State Department and you didn't go through your region head and then you went through the 7th floor at the State Department, you put yourself at some risk. And nobody wants to do that to their career. So from a country-specific side, I think Canada will want somebody who is conversant with the issues, who is an advocate for the Canada-U.S. or U.S.-Canada relationship, but somebody who's close to the administration that can be effective at the White House level. And I think if you look back over time, I think substantially that's what you've gotten from the wide range of really great ambassadors that have served from the U.S. To Canada. And so, I actually think it's some weird combination. To just pick somebody who's a friend that doesn't understand this relationship, I think is missing the opportunity to do really good things. To pick somebody who just has a deep, look, I know everything about Canada-U.S. relationship. Yeah, but can you pick up the phone and call the president or the vice president and push an issue ahead, or at least the Secretary of State or the head of various agencies? Well, maybe not. Well, that's a loss. So it's this combination, this balance of somebody with enough experience that they can lead on taking initiative on some of these files that are so important to our two countries, but also having that personal relationship to move things along.
Let's talk for a minute about the bilateral relationship. Before we started our conversation, you and I were chatting, and I was mentioning that I think there's a real sense of relief in Canada that we have an administration in Washington where you don't have to get up in the morning and check your Twitter feed and see if Canada has been mentioned unfavorably. And I must say, where the switch was thrown for me was when I watched President-elect Biden arrive in Washington and go directly to the Lincoln Memorial for that very dignified service to recognize the 400,000 people whose lives had been lost to COVID. And what struck me so powerfully was dignity and decency are back in town. They're back in fashion, and that will clearly affect the relationship. The Prime Minister and the President, one of the last things I remember while you were still ambassador was the dinner that the Prime Minister held in Ottawa for Vice President Biden just before the swearing in of the new administration. It means there's a pre-existing relationship. How important is that to Canada, that the Prime Minister and the President know one another and have that relationship?
Well, it's really helpful for sure. And I'll tell you, knowing how that dialogue went and that conversation, sitting at the dinner with the two of them, and spending time with then Vice President on the trip, back and forth to the airport, and having private conversations even since. And the Vice President made those comments. He was so proud to have been invited to have a dinner in his honor, and he was humbled by it. He bragged to then President Obama, "Hey, I got a state dinner today." And I think that is something that you never forget, right? And so that kindness and generosity was done just out of kindness and generosity. There was no way that anyone was expecting anything in return. Couldn't possibly have imagined that here was the outgoing vice president who did not run for president, whose the other party has now won the election, yet to be sworn in, and you were going out of your way to just say thank you for this relationship. That resonated with then Vice President Biden. It really resonates with him now as President Biden. And I'll tell you, it made then the path, I believe, easier to be the first call. The first call after the election, the first call after the inauguration, and because of this pre-existing really good relationship. And so I am incredibly optimistic that the two men will work very closely together, tackling some of the largest challenges that we have. And boy, do we have challenges facing us now. But let me just say, it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be days where something's not going to go the way you, Canada, or we, the United States, want it to go. And I sure enough will get a phone call from somebody in media saying, I thought you said the relationship's going to be really good now. What about this? And so the relationship's very complex. You know, you really, when you're ambassador, you really don't fully appreciate how complex the relationship is with the, you know, nearly $700 billion worth of bilateral trade. You can imagine all these different goods and services that go. And then there's the separate direct investments of hundreds of billions of dollars that take place. And then you have the energy and the environment and this shared border of 5,525 miles where 400,000 people before COVID were crossing every day. And then we have the cultural exchanges. And then geopolitically, the things that we work on. It's a complex relationship. And it touches every aspect of our two governments and our citizens' lives. And, you know, you just don't fully appreciate that till you're in the seat and you get a phone call one day and something happens. And you're like, seriously, how did that happen? And you've got to work on that. Things that, you know, you can't ever disclose, but things that, you know, sometimes we all learn about and deal with.
Let's talk about a couple of those tough issues.
Sure.
Keystone XL, you no doubt anticipated the question. Less than 5 hours after the president was sworn in, one of the first things he did was to sign an executive order canceling the permit for Keystone XL. It wasn't altogether unsurprising for Canada, but it was still a punch in the gut. If you were advising the president, would you have said to go ahead and do it then? Or would you have said Canada deserves a day in court and you should at least hear the prime minister out after you've become president to see if there are other means of dealing with this issue?
So I think many of you listening here know the history of Keystone. And if you don't, we wrote about it extensively in The Art of Diplomacy, where we were talking about strengthening the Canada-U.S. relationship in times of uncertainty. Well, Keystone was there when I arrived, and it was, you know, an existential focus of Canada and the U.S., and we were going through a decision process that was disciplined, I believe, at the State Department level. But it became all-consuming in many ways, and it was a highly distracting issue, albeit important, don't get me wrong, but it really took away the opportunity, I think, to have constructive conversations and do more on the bilateral relationship and put more wins on the board, because we had a process going on, but everybody, you know, wanted to try in some way to influence the game. But once the decision was made by President Obama, just a few days into the new Trudeau government, and I know he was disappointed, and I know the new government was disappointed because I spoke to so many of the members of that government, including the prime minister at the time. Disappointed, yes, but didn't let it distract from the opportunity set, which then led to, I think, one of the best year and a halves that we had. So if I was asked, which I was not, so to be clear, and I do not work for the Biden administration, so understand that what I'm about to say is personal opinion only. But if I had a phone call and said, given your experience on Keystone, what would you recommend that we do? And I would say the following. You made a campaign commitment a year ago. Is it your intention to move ahead and cancel this? And if the answer is yes, you've analyzed it, you've listened, you've taken into account all of the things that are being said and published in the media, what Canada's saying, what the pipeline company's saying, everything, that you're taking it all in, and your decision is going to be you're going to revoke it, then do it right away. do it right off the bat. And we'll take the heat for that. There's no doubt you will. And there will be disappointment. But if you have already made your decision and then you just drag it out, how many of us have had a decision we've already made in a relationship in one way, shape, or another, with a customer, with something, based on all the information that we've taken in over a decade, and yet we delay that decision? It doesn't get better. And I think that we're facing such large crises right now that I think that's where the focus of the time and energy need to go. And especially given the fact that if the decision was already made. So that's what I would have said. I didn't have that phone call asking me for my advice. But the sooner the better, given where we are, because bad news does not get better over time.
Bruce, do you assume that the president understood the national unity implications for Canada of a decision on KXL, or was the decision likely made without his understanding that this would exacerbate the tensions between Ottawa and Western Canada?
I think he's a pretty smart man with regard to the international landscape. And while I can't attest to what he knew or didn't know or what components went into that decision process, when they announced it during the campaign and I got a phone call, did you see this announcement? I was as surprised as the next person that announcement came out. I wasn't consulted on that announcement at that moment. But understand that the people who are around him today, former Secretary Kerry, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Brian Dees, Gina McCarthy, all these people were there as part of that decision. And I do believe, with millions of comments and deep analysis done by the State Department, that the original decision was made taking all that into consideration for sure. And I think that the people around him were very knowledgeable of these risks, but they were also very focused on, we're very focused on climate change. If anybody hasn't gotten a message, both at home and abroad, that climate change is going to be a primary pillar of this organization, of this administration, of this government, as you say, you've missed something. It is a primary focus. And they made the decision, the vice president elect and then president made the decision that this does not fit in the U.S. national interest.
So KXL was last week's issue. This week, the discussion is about Buy America, which is obviously an issue of concern for businesses in the national capital region as well, and particularly in the defense sector. How do you see this rolling out? And what is the impact you see on Canadian business in the United States?
So let's just play this forward so that there's an understanding, at least my perspective of this. And, again, it's private citizen, former U.S. ambassador with some perspective on this from a business and government perspective, but not involved in any of these decision processes. Picture this right now, the U.S. government, the debate is how much of a check we're going to write to continue to send Americans at home, who are at home, sitting at home, millions of Americans who are out of work, and small and many-sized businesses that are out of work. And we're trying to keep everything together as best we can until we get to the other side when the vaccine is out and people can actually go back out and work and do these things. And I think there's an understanding that the U.S. government's going to spend a lot of money, hundreds of billions of dollars, on infrastructure or, putting Americans back to work. I think this is as much a back to work plan as anything else. And I think people need to take a pause a minute and understand that it's much better for the U.S. to take the Treasury money and pay for things that are causing jobs to either be created or maintained in the United States, especially in the post-pandemic period. Now, that all being said, I'll say a couple of things. One, this is not targeted at any country. This is a policy that is based for U.S. government procurement on a global basis. So it's number two, it's something that shouldn't be a surprise again. It's, I'm sure, a disappointment to some who are intimately involved in producing such things, but it shouldn't be a surprise. Number three, historically, there has been a waiver process. I believe there will be a waiver process in this time. And from my experience, nobody knew that waiver process better than the Canadians. They knew every aspect, and they were very, very successful. You all were very successful at waiver implementation. And so that will be there. Fourth, many companies have businesses in the United States. And those businesses will qualify, I believe, to get those contracts, assuming that they're going to continue to put people to work. And so companies can look at how they move their production, how they focus their business, especially if they're cross-border companies. So it might be a really good opportunity there for a number of companies. Lastly, on that waiver process, there are going to be a whole bunch of things that the U.S. cannot possibly source itself, that Canada will be in a prime position to source. And as a result of that, I can see that done. Now, remember, this is not the whole economy. This is just procurement through the U.S. government of U.S. Treasury dollars. And so I understand it, given the pandemic and given the economic situation that we're in.
One of the issues last time was the chill that this put on, quite apart from the legal aspects of it. It was the subnational governments, for example, saying it's simply too risky for me to try to navigate through all of these regulations. If this is a foreign company, I'm not going to touch them, period. Whether they're Canadian or whether they're eligible or not, it's not worth it. And that chill cost Canadian companies opportunities to bid, and it drove up costs to American taxpayers as a result. Are you concerned about that? And also, last time out, both for the renegotiation of NAFTA, and for Buy America, we put on a Team Canada full court press with business, labor, provinces and others reaching out to their counterparts in the United States to try to impress upon them the importance of the bilateral relationships and not putting up walls between us. Should Canadian business, Canadian governments and others be looking at mounting a similar campaign in the United States now?
So first of all, I hadn't thought, honestly, Perrin, I hadn't really reflected on or thought about the knock-on effect of other businesses getting impacted because a company says I didn't realize or how the rules work, and companies just pulling back from the acquisition process, all just because they didn't want to do the effort to go through the rules. And so I'm going to have to think on that. But
it was more the procurement agencies, U.S. subnational governments saying, this is complex, it's not worth it for us to take a gamble on this. We will simply ban foreign companies, period. This is something I hadn't processed before, but I can understand how that would happen. I really can. I just don't know how large that is or how to even quantify that. But any $1 or one contract for any individual company, it impacts them. And so I feel for that. And I'm sure they're going to be, we're living in a world right now where I've got even real news that becomes fake news. So, now if we tell people that this is what we're going to do and it has nuanced or shades of gray in terms of interpretation, it just is more and more difficult. And so I hear you, you're right. Look, it's not for me to tell how to take on and communicate with the United States, but I think when you come together, I was watching how you came together with regard to your negotiations of NAFTA. Very different how we did it in the United States, where the Republicans, came up with a package, went to Congress. Congress said, hey, wait a minute, we got to change this, and then we had to go back, we had to make these changes and do these things. And you came in a consolidated way, which I think was incredibly effective as a means of countering the Trump
administration. But I think that there are always lots of opportunities for Canadians to come together to promote what you do in the United States to expand your business opportunity. One idea, honestly, Perrin, that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and that is, and look, knowing all of you, you're doing this now, but if you're not, here's a thought. You will really benefit from Americans. There's cabin fever going on here as well. We were talking about cabin fever earlier, and people are all talking about, where am I going to first travel? And everybody's conversation right now in the U.S., banging back and forth with each other. What's your first trip? Where are you going to go? Boy, what an opportunity, both for brand Canada as a country, both for provinces or cities, to start extending, we miss you. Once this virus is behind us, I hope you plan on coming to visit blank, Ottawa, for this example. And here are the amazing things that we'll be able to do together. And, I think doing that branding moment now, I don't want you to miss an opportunity where I think there's going to be a snapback, like there are going to be a lot of people that are going to do traveling. And I think some large number of those people may not want to get on a plane first. So they're going to get in their car. And by opening up Canada to tourism and this will help your restaurants, your small businesses, your hotels. It'll help the relationship bilaterally by a lot. And, I think it's good for sporting events. It's good for so much. And I just think there's a silence right now. And I know people are leafing through travel sites, doing these things. And there's very few places as beautiful as your beautiful country.
Going back to the bilateral relationship, the Prime Minister and the President have had their first call. One assumes that before too long they'll have their first meeting, and that Canada will likely be high on the list for the new president to meet face to face with a foreign leader. Condoleezza Rice once famously said that the dealing with the Canadians was like a meeting of the condominium board, that the roof needs repairs, we need to fix up the paint in the lobby and so on. The President of the United States is focused on a series of global crises, which are monumental in their nature. And so very often they get off the plane in Canada and the Prime Minister says, here's our list of irritants or of minor issues. If you were advising the Prime Minister in terms of that first meeting, what should the agenda look like? What should the Canadian agenda look like? And how should he approach President Biden?
So this is very wise, and I'm glad the way you raised it, because a complex, large relationship that we have always needs areas of maintenance and repair, and it always needs work. And so those issues, rise to the surface because we really historically have not had monumental issues between the two of us. So it then, rests on these smaller issues, not that they're not as big to the people who are being impacted. But here's what I would say. I think this is such a unique opportunity for Canada that the sky's the limit for this relationship. And why do I say that? I would say the following. The U.S. has come off of 4 years of an incredibly erratic leader. I'll leave it at that. And has damaged a lot of relationships around the world and has left us with a lot of domestic problems, including impeachment trial that's coming up, including a pandemic that's, as you mentioned, killed 400,000 people and is likely to kill another 100,000 in the next 30 days. And we have racial tensions. We have people who believe that the president is not legitimate and that the election wasn't legitimate. And we have, obviously, the climate problem that we're facing. So I would look at those big pillars, and I would carpe diem, seize the day. You see, Canada has historically been well positioned as a result of its positioning with the United States. Not always aligned, but next to and with us. And so you think about the size of your economy or the size of your population, you always are operating on the world stage at a much bigger playing field. G7, G20, NATO, NORAD, where you have this joint command operation of North America, that you have opportunities in the WHO and the WTO and UN, and we can go on and on and on. But in almost every one of these institutions, Canada has a seat at the table. But what do you do with that seat? And what do you do with this opportunity set? I try to, what I try to do is keep the condominium issues, don't throw them away, because we're going to need to deal with them. Make sure our staffs between our embassies are working on those issues and dealing with them. But let's go to the president who has the weight of the world on his shoulders in a very short timeline to tackle it and identify 1, 2, 3 really meaningful, big opportunities that are win-win. Not just I'm doing this for the US, but it really helps Canada in its stature, in its positioning, in its abilities around the world to play on the world stage, but also helps a new president who's coming in, who's tackling these problems. And so I grab any number of these that you think best fit your government and your abilities to help out. And that's the way I interpreted the call. But now it's carpe diem. Let's seize the day. Let's go for it.
So that the piece of paper that comes out of the Prime Minister's pocket shouldn't be the grievance list, the irritants. It should be, Mr. President, there are major issues the world is facing. We're here to be part of the solution. Let's work together.
Here are three ways we can work together, and I'm open to any other way that you think that Canada can be helpful to achieving the joint shared goals that we both have to leave the world in a better place than it currently stands.
One last topic I want to touch on. The time has really flown. The priorities of the Biden administration. In the first few days, it appears as if there are essentially two key priorities. The first one being obviously COVID and bringing it under control. The second one being national unity within the United States. What do you see as the key priorities over the next 6 months or next year that the president is going to have front and center?
Well, COVID is almost 1, 2, 3, because everything else you do around that, the stimulus package, the things that you're trying to get done, and whether it's an infrastructure bill, a large part of our relationship with our allies in the world, are going to deal with the variations of this virus, which, we should anticipate that there's going to be a surprise along the way. I don't know what that is, but boy, a year ago when there were 5 people hospitalized in the United States, and if you were to tell me, a year from now, 500,000 people would potentially be gone by the end of February, I think that would have classified as a huge surprise. And so we have a vaccine, we have a new president, we have a lot of optimism, but I think we also have to prepare for some of the things that can go awry. But in the meantime, this president has to work with a 50-50 divided Senate, with a nearly divided Congress, with a whole group of people in the United States that, want to see him fail, and which is so sad and unfortunate that, which means by extension, failure for the United States, but that's okay because it helps us. And that's just such an awful perspective. And then there are going to be these surprises, as I said. I don't know, some international event, something's going to take place, and we're going to wake up and go, wow, I didn't see that one coming. Remember when Barack Obama came in and we had this BP oil spill in the Gulf, and, they said, sir, we have an oil spill? And he says, okay, well, let's clean it up. Sir, there's a bigger problem. What's that? We can't stop it. What do you mean you can't stop it? Just go down. No, we don't know how. And so that became then this just ongoing every day. Oil's leaching up, splashing on these beaches, doing these things. But who would have predicted that? And then we had to tackle Ebola, which we did together, I think, very effectively. Who would have thought that? So, there are going to be surprises as well, and we've just got to be prepared and be adaptable to handle those. But I am an optimist that we are on the right track because we have a good president, we have a vaccine, and, spring is coming. It's not soon enough, but soon.
That note of optimism is a very good place to leave it. It's been a fascinating half hour, and I want to thank you for joining us and tell you that we are all looking forward to having you back in the National Capital Region in whatever capacity you choose to return. You're a familiar and a very welcome figure here, and we're grateful to you for being with us today.
Thank you for your generous comments, and I appreciate it very much and look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Welcome back. What an enlightening discussion between Bruce Heyman and Perrin Beatty. A great job to both. I hope our audience feels much more informed about what President Biden's administration might mean for Canada's trading relationship with the U.S. To demonstrate our appreciation, a gift will be provided to both Bruce and Perrin from Royal LePage Commercial, our speaker gift sponsor. I want to specifically thank Matt Jacques and Jim Carty from Royal LePage Commercial for their support. As we wrap up today's show, I want to take a minute to give you a few important highlights at what's happening at the Ottawa Business Journal. OBJ has just released its winter issue, a big, thick 72-page publication with lots of reading as we're in lockdown mode here. Let me give you a quick overview of what's in that issue. First, we have a cover story on Ottawa's top tech firms to watch. Great one. A recap of the 2020 Best Ottawa Business Awards that took place in November, as well as some video content, I should point out. Something called OBJ Regional, which is a look at Eastern Ontario's economy. We have a Women in Business section, co-produced by the Women's Business Network, and also a regular section called Techopia, which is a report on the region's technology sector. The easiest way to access the winter issue is by visiting www.obj.ca and look for a thumbnail image at the bottom of the page. By the way, a reminder that obj.ca website is updated throughout the day with local business news and features, and you can subscribe to a newsletter called OBJ Today to get your daily dose of business headlines Monday to Friday. As we wrap up this morning, let's recognize our sponsors one more time. Our lead sponsor, Hydro Ottawa, also the Commissionaires Ottawa, the Weston Ottawa, Algonquin College, La Cité, Rogers Communications, RBC, Enbridge, our global sponsor, Oakwood Designers and Builders, our speaker gift sponsor, Royal LePage Commercial, our coffee sponsor, Capital Office Interiors and Steelcase, our door prize sponsor, the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club, Go Sens Go, and our caterers, the Centurion Conference and Event Center. Thank you to all of them. The next Mayor's Breakfast will come back in February with another great speaker. Please watch www.ottawabot.ca. That stands for Board of Trade, ottawabot.ca, and obj.ca for more details. Thank you to Rogers TV, especially Gavin Lumsden, for its great support in producing this broadcast. On behalf of OBJ, the Board of Trade, Jim Watson, and Rogers TV, thanks for joining us. We'll see you very soon in February. Bye-bye.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.